So the article was an Atlantic article entitled "There is no debate over critical race theory." As you can see here from our boy Kendi. Love his book on how to be an anti-racist. Favorite book on racism, which is a lovely, subject matter if you haven't really explored it in depth. But anyway, Kendi's my boy. Love his work. He's mostly a systems guy. He doesn't really delve into individual bias of individual racist people. He doesn't deal with that kind of stuff. I wouldn't think there's a lot that I could critique him on. I'm the empathy guy. He usually works that one side makes an assumption about the other side, then boom, I come in. I'm like, nah, son, that doesn't work. But recently, I joined a Stop CRT movement group just to, suss things out, figure out what's right, what's wrong, just to listen in. I want to be a fly on the wall, understand people. My guy's like, yo, bro, this guy, Kendi's tripping. Is he your boy or not? Is he your boy or not? And I'm like, he's my boy, and I can't imagine he'd be like biased or make assumptions about the other side. But let me go ahead and check out this paper for you. So I read the article, and now here's how you respond in a way that maybe the other side would listen and start listening to your complaints. His major points in this article, if you hadn't read it, are number one, the right does not understand the crystallized definition of CRT. Number two, a lot of people on the right-hand side are not making up, but they are misunderstanding what he writes and what CRT is. Third point is that he believes the right is making up all this stuff, that there is no controversy. It's actually what he calls Republican operatives are going in and creating this kind of straw man of CRT. They don't understand CRT. They don't understand Dr. Kendi, and therefore they're just making up stuff so that they can fight against it or galvanize their side to it. He calls CRT the next thing in line for the Republican operatives to go after. He shows how Republicans went after Black Lives Matter. They went after the 1619 Project. Then it was cancel culture, and now it's CRT is the next new big and bad boogeyman. That's what he's kind of claiming. Right, so his first claim about CRT, the right not understanding CRT, yeah, that's true. But also, in a way, it seems like he doesn't fully grasp what CRT has become. It's not only just a crystallized framework, which he talks about a lot in his paper, but it's also a movement. Like we saw in the last video I did, that there's a difference between the crystallized framework, which deals with law and policy, which he talks a lot in the video, in his article, but he doesn't mention anything about the movement and how that framework's being applied to different fields, how it's being applied to history, all these things. It's not just the right that are saying this. People on the left are also saying this. The second claim that they're making up stuff about him or like not understanding what he's about, that's definitely true. So he says, I have been called the father of critical race theory, although I was born in 1982. That's a pretty good line because critical race theory came out before then. People are misquoting him. So he says, take journalist Matthew Yaglas in February in the Washington Post. He wrote that, I think that any racial gap simply is racist by definition. Any policy that maintains such a gap is a racist policy. And most debatably, any intellectual explanation of its existence, sociological, cultural, and so on, is also racist. He's never said this. Like people on the right, my friends on the right, he's never said this. Don't this person made an assumption. So it seems like a lot of people who are like criticizing him haven't fully read his stuff and are kind of making up things about him or just not understanding what he said and what he means and yada, yada, yada. The third thing, which is they're making it up, he hasn't really showed any evidence. If he believes he's shown evidence, I would ask him again, what crystallized evidence have you shown that this entire thing is being made up? Anytime you say that there is nothing, your article is going to have to do a lot of proving to show. It can't just be deduction. You got to prove that the other side is making up stuff. So throughout this piece, he doesn't really point to a smoking gun that the right made this particular beef up. He points to their complaints, but then I think makes kind of takes a leap in logic and saying, okay, they're complaining, they don't understand CRT, and so they're making up all fervor, but they're complaining about something legitimate. Like I went over this in my last video. You see that certain books are being taught in schools that teach white guilt and shame. I wonder if Professor Kendi would be behind, if he's like supportive of those books being taught, if he would have any critique of those books. So I guess the question is, what would we call this? If we don't call this the CRT movement, what would he call this? I see a lot of comments in the group that I'm in about social emotional learning. It seems to be coming, all the problems that the right is complaining about seem to be coming from this movement, and there's a confusion on if it's social emotional learning or CRT. That goes back and forth, but it's something that's legitimate, something that they're complaining about, and he seems to kind of dismiss that. But I really wonder if we could sit down with him and ask him, like, well, what do you think about all these complaints about the books that kids are being forced to read, about kids being forced to rank themselves in terms of inferiority or whatever it is. Like, there's a whole list of things that are happening. Has he looked into those claims, and what does he think about them? So I would first start with asking those questions, because you never want to make an assumption. Maybe he just didn't think through those things, or maybe he has thought through them and he could dismiss this easily. But one thing I think right now, it still seems like he's making a large assumption that this all is smoke and mirrors. Like, it's definitely coming from somewhere. And so I would just focus on that assumption. So